Last week, Sony Corporation and WS Audiology announced that they have entered into a partnership collaboration with the intent of supplying new products and services in the over-the-counter self-fitting hearing aid market in the United States. Here to discuss this partnership is Maarten Barmentlo, Chief Marketing Officer and President of the OTC segment for WS Audiology. Before we dive into the specifics of this partnership, Maarten, could you kindly share your background and current role?
Yes, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to give you our perspective on this exciting partnership. But my name is, as you said, Maarten Barmentlo. I work for WS Audiology, overlook all marketing activities for the group worldwide, and also have the honor to lead the efforts in OTC. I have been in the industry, I think now in total for about 10 years. I have a background before that in various consumer healthcare industries where we sold consumer products through healthcare professionals, like the hearing care professionals are, of course, extremely important in our industry.
Yeah, and Maarten, before we move into the conversation on the partnership, if I can ask the question, what is WSA's position on the recently passed OTC bill?
As you may know, right, our purpose is to bring wonderful sound for all. And if you look at the worldwide population as a total industry, right? So industry together with our hearing care professional partners, we are not addressing all consumers. In fact, only 15% worldwide, approximately. And in the US, where audiology is, of course, very well developed, there's still about 2 out of 3 consumers that will benefit from a hearing aid, right? Do not get one today. So there is a big opportunity out there for all of us to bring the miracle of hearing back to more consumers in the US. This opportunity to now augment, right, the distribution of hearing health solutions to consumers via more channels that is being enabled by this new law is therefore something that is good for the consumers. I can also explain why we believe it is also a good opportunity for the hearing care professionals, and it is also a good opportunity for us to deliver on our purpose.
Yeah, the OTC bill was designed to help the entire market, not just the consumer, but also the providers. And as we discuss this partnership, we'll get into the discussion of how this is going to help the providers, because I think it's critical that they understand that their role in this whole process is still very much paramount in the success of the individual.
Absolutely.
So this partnership that is now taking place and that has now been announced, there's a YouTube video and some news clips, and it was interesting to me to learn that Sony approached WSA. I mean, I'm not surprised that they approached the hearing care market and that they approached one of the better hearing aid companies in the marketplace. But can you talk a little bit about why they approached you and how this partnership kind of developed?
Yes, so I think it's good that you pick up. I think in a partnership, right, there's 2 parties that come together, and it is interesting, right, when we discussed this with Sony, they looked at the opportunity and looked, of course, first at can we do this ourselves, or are there essential elements of what it takes to be successful that we can do faster or better by partnering up with somebody else. In parallel, we did the same. We did quite a bit of market research in the US to see what would be the expectations of consumers when it comes to the emerging OTC category. And then we learned that a trusted brand, I think, was something that was quite essential for consumers in this emerging space. And of course, the availability of the product in channels that are different than the professional channels, on top of getting it through the professional channels. And then we realized, right, that teaming up with a partner that has a heritage in sound, has a strong consumer brand that is related to sound, is as committed as we are to innovation, and has access to distribution channels where we are normally not operating with, would actually augment what we see as success criteria as well. So I think it was a bit of a process of the two parties doing things in parallel, and then I think we did in the end meet and started to talk. And I think that's also why fairly quickly into the discussions, parties recognized that that the two companies together could actually really help, right, this category become a success.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things that I've read is the quote. It says the technology needs to catch up to serve the new consumer market. And so I think as both parties were looking at this partnership, it led to this whole discussion that there's a gap and each party could bring a certain aspect in order to close that gap and improve not only the technology, but the service delivery aspect as well.
Exactly. And I think it is important, right, when we look at the opportunity space, that we also recognize that where we are today, right? I think in particular in the US market, there is a good network of audiologists and hearing care professionals that deliver outstanding service, right, to those customers that they serve. And we also believe, right, that the best hearing care that any individual worldwide would be able to get is through an audiologist, right? I mean, that is not, the reality is only that a lot of consumers today do not yet do that. Now, in order to still deliver a good level of care, we need to develop new solutions that do not only have the component of delivering, right, the amplification that the patients need, but also help the consumers through the process of adjusting the hearing aid, right, to their individual needs. Again, the best way to do that is to go to the audiologist. But for those consumers that don't do that, we have to offer in the solution not only the hardware, but also, you know, a workflow where we take the consumer to do the self-fitting. And that is what I was referring to in the interview when I say the technology needs to catch up.
Yeah, so just so that I'm understanding this, you know, there's two segments. There's going to be, it looks like a provider assisted segment, and then there's going to be a self-fit segment where the consumer is do it yourself. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. I think the other aspect that I think is worth mentioning here, right, and in particular for the audience, is in the research we did, we asked consumers, where would you expect to find OTC solutions? And it is encouraging, right, that a lot of consumers said we expect to find OTC solutions in the professional channels. Right? They also expect it to be available online. They also expect it to be available in big box retailers, but they also expect it to be available in the professional channels. And that's why we believe, right, that also for the existing customers of our brands, this is an opportunity, right? They can offer a broader palette of solutions to the people that walk into their door, and it can make their business grow faster and then serve more consumers, which is what drives, right, all the hearing care professionals to their clinic every day.
Yeah, and as you're talking, and as I was, you know, watching some of the media that was out, what really strikes me is this balance or this partnership between the two companies. You know, although it's dealing with the hearing impairment and the loss and the provider and the patient's difficulties, it's also expanding in the needs of communication and wellness and health and some of these other categories by potentially making devices smaller or making them more unique. Can you talk a little bit about that piece of that partnership?
Yes. So I think we're very pleased, right, that it is a partnership that is more than simply, you know, a brand license or a distribution agreement, right? It's truly a partnership where both parties bring all of their strong assets. And the technological element is very important. I think we all know that in the last decades, miniaturization has brought a lot of benefits to the hearing care market. And this is something we're very good at, but obviously our partner Sony is also extremely good in miniaturization. And miniaturization gives also the opportunity to augment the offering, right? To bring new benefits. And one of the big new benefits, right, that we have recently brought into the category is rechargeable hearing aids. In the beginning, they were bigger than non-rechargeable, but now they are also very, very, very tiny and small. I think another element is the connectivity, right, to the cell phones, which basically connects, right, the hearing instruments to the outside world of the consumer. And when you start to think about the things that our partner Sony can bring to bear, being also very strong in entertainment and in wellness solutions, etc., I think there we have a world opening of our opportunities. Of course, right, that is longer term, right? But it gives a lot of opportunities, right, to continue to make these devices and solutions be more and more something that consumers really want, right? I think because that's one of the challenges in hearing care. Consumers need hearing aids. A lot of consumers don't want them, and we see that, you know, by bringing the strengths of both parties together, can make these devices and solutions also more desirable, right, for more consumers. And with that, we want to contribute to a higher penetration, right, of hearing care solutions amongst those consumers that need it.
Yeah, and that's one of the questions I was going to ask you. Is that it sounds like there's an opportunity here to lessen barriers, whether it's accessibility, whether it's stigma, whether it's generational differences where the younger generation is more apt to streaming versus the older generation. It just sounds like this partnership is going to cast a wider net. And as you pointed out, we'll find out down the road how much of an increase that's going to be in the penetration of these devices, and how much the benefit of these devices that these individuals are going to gain over time.
Yeah, and you know, I told you in the beginning, right, that I have a background in consumer healthcare industries, and I've also been in an industry that used to have very low penetration and has very high penetration today. That is power toothbrushes, and there we also saw, right, that opening up new channels, broadening the scope of the solutions, in the end drive penetration. And I think it is our joint responsibility to make sure that we convert this opportunity that is out there now into an opportunity to serve more consumers, right? If the only thing we manage to do is to not grow the market and just have more options, I think then we have not delivered on not on our own purpose, not on the purpose of why this law was, you know, passed through U.S. government, and also not on, you know, the purpose that all the hearing care professionals, right, in the U.S. have. They want to serve also as many consumers as they can. So it is a bit of a joint responsibility, but I think the data also show that there is growth opportunity, right? A big survey done in the U.S. shows that of those consumers that have hearing loss, have not yet decided to buy a hearing aid, a lot of them would actually consider buying it if OTC devices would be available, right? So there is clear indication in the research that we will expand the market and pull more consumers in that today, for, you know, for various reasons, right, are not yet being served. Now, you mentioned barriers. I think that is a very important element, right? There is an access, awareness, and affordability, right? When you look at the big barriers, and of course stigma, and I think, you know, with this partnership, I think we can address quite a number of those barriers. You know, stigma. I think the Sony brand will also make, you know, the solution more desirable from, you know, and more appealing to a younger audience, but certainly also, right, to elderly, and I think the you know, the form factors that we are going to offer are going to play an important role there, right? And I think we've all learned that is important in this industry, and we have the plans to continue to evolve in that area. And then, of course, the availability through different sales channels, right? That works on the access. It makes it easier to enter the category. And of course, right, is for some consumers, affordability is also an issue, and the OTC category is also right supposed to help and will help in that aspect as well. So I think I see that we can really help work on these barriers. I think we should also realize that with 1 or 2 months into a new world with this category, or maybe a year, when we haven't solved all the problems of all the consumers, right, that are today not entering the category. So it will take some time for this to grow. But I think it is a great opportunity. And as I said, for consumers, absolutely also for the existing hearing care professional channel. And of course, right, for us to deliver on our purpose.
Yeah. And just to clarify on the brand, and I really appreciate your commentary here, but on the brand, my understanding is the initial brand is going to come out under the Sony marketing brand. Is that correct?
Correct. The devices will be Sony branded, yes.
Okay, but WSA will also continue to function in the prescriptive realm for the providers. Is that correct?
Yeah, as you may know, right, we have a portfolio of brands, and our brands have their own product portfolio and their own go-to-market, and operate fairly independently, and that we continue, right. This is also a new channel, and that is Sony branded. We will not bring Stigma branded or WideX branded OTC solutions to the market.
Yeah. So as we kind of think about this, the significance of this partnership, we've talked about it from the consumer standpoint, and we've kind of touched on it from the provider standpoint. So as you're communicating here with the audience, which is primarily the providers, what can you share with them as they start to think about offering this in their practices, or if they should see these patients? I know the product is not out yet, but as they start to think about these patients coming into their practices.
Yeah, I think, as you said, right, we're not yet in a position to talk about the specific solution that we're going to offer. So I want to try to limit this to a bit more high level direction. But I think when you look at the opportunity space from a hearing care professional point of view, I think the first one is, as I said, the research indicates that a lot of consumers expect these type of solutions to be available at the hearing care professional. So with new entrants, right, there will be more noise, there will be more communication around hearing care, which will lead to more consumers, right, shopping for solutions, and they expect to find them in their stores. So I think that's one opportunity where they probably don't need to do anything, right, but will benefit. I think the other element which is there, if you make a OTC solution part of your solution, your portfolio of solutions, I think you can make sure that you use that in your advertising to specifically, right, drive consumers to your own franchise. So I think that's the second element. And then the third element, and I'm sure all hearing care professionals, right, that are watching this will recognize, is it happens a lot that consumers make an appointment. You spend your time, doing the examination, the consultation, and you even let people experience the benefit, right, in a fitting, and then consumers decide not to buy, right, and for some of them that might be for reasons that it is too costly, or that they find this not good enough, or that stigma still plays a role. I think for those consumers, right, that basically would otherwise also walk out, right, without being served, there is a great opportunity to say, look, but we also have a solution that gets you a lot of the benefits, and that is of a brand and more affordable, So you could also at the end of the sales cycle, of course, right, offer that. And I think the other part, which is also not unimportant, right, is this will bring consumers earlier into the category. And as we all know, your hearing loss progresses over time. And so many consumers for whom OTC solutions will bring good benefits and they're happy consumers, over time, we expect that a lot of them will also start to seek professional support and professional solutions that are going to be fitted by the hearing care professionals. So I think there are quite a number of angles where we see that this could benefit the hearing care professionals.
Yeah, Maarten, it sounds like it's a win-win, not only for the consumers, but also for the providers. And as you pointed out, I think it's going to open up a catalyst of new and younger generational users, because you've got, as you pointed out, different form factors. You've got different offerings within the technology itself. Some of these younger folks are a little more tech savvy. They should be able to help themselves, but there's also a need for the provider to take care of individuals who recognize and realize that they need a professional services. So it's a product mix, and just as the industry is changing, the providers also have to be able and willing to move as the market is moving. And so as we wrap up this interview, I'll be curious to see in a couple of years, hopefully we can get you back on, to see what those trends are and how much we've actually moved that needle. Because we've been looking at this market here for 30 years or so, and the needle has moved slightly each year, basically based on organic growth. I'll be very, very curious to see if we exceed that and how much we exceed it by and where those expectations are being met.
Yeah, I know, and I will gladly take you up on that invite to come back. I think we all want the same, right? Is we want to bring consumers in earlier because we know it's good for preservation of hearing, by starting early, but it's also making consumers' life better, right? And they're going to be happier people. I think the other part is that we bring in more consumers, right? Because there's also still a lot of quite old consumers that would benefit from hearing aids that are not being served. And I think we would all be proud, right? The both parties in the partnership, but certainly also our partners in the hearing care professionals, if we would be really able to show the average age of the first-time user, right, has really moved down, and if the penetration would not be around 30%, but let's say more around 60%, right? I think then we would all be then we could all be very proud of ourselves.
Yeah, Maarten, I really appreciate the time you've taken. I'm really interested to have you back on down the road as the market evolves and we start to see the technology evolve, the industry evolve, and of course consumers be helped. And wishing you guys all the best of luck. And again, we'll chat in a few years here.
That's great. Thank you very much.